New exclusive CNN reporting about highly classified intelligence that went missing at the end of the Trump administration. The intelligence was related to Russian election interference in the United States. It was so secret, it was kept inside a safe within another safe at CIA headquarters. But in the final weeks of the Trump administration, a copy of that intelligence was put inside a binder brought to the White House as part of an effort to declassify documents related to the FBI's Russia probe. And from there, the trail goes cold.
Yeah, there were more documents, and of all of the things the documents could address, Russian interference in the 2016 election is the content of the documents, the binder, the massive 10-inch thick binder, by the way. It just happened to go missing. It's so weird. And so on theme, by the way, for the way that it was supposed to be securely stored, that they had a safe inside of a safe, sort of like a Russian nesting doll sort of security strategy there, but that's gone. We don't know where that is. There are some theories, and we're gonna get into the evidence, but we have a little bit more first.
So this binder that was brought to the White House contained raw intelligence that the US and its NATO allies collected on Russia's efforts to meddle in the 2016 election, including sources and methods, which are some of the most sensitive information in the intelligence world. So what we're talking about here is the underlying intelligence that formed the basis of the US government's assessment that Russian President Vladimir Putin sought to help Trump win the 2016 election.
So there is some information for you. We have a little bit more, okay? So to the best of everyone's collective ability, it has been able to be tracked to the last known whereabouts of this 10-inch thick binder again, the last days of the Trump administration, and supposedly former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows was reported to have made a mad dash minutes before Joe Biden was sworn in an attempt to declassify documents which could have included that particular binder. That's what they're saying. He apparently rushed to the DOJ to hand deliver a redacted copy for one last review. Years later, the Justice Department has yet to release all the documents, despite Trump's declassification order. Additional copies with varying levels of redaction ended up at the National Archives. He apparently, by the way, Meadows, had made copies of the binder for some conservative politicians and journalists. And CNN notes that the copies initially sent out were frantically retrieved at the direction of White House lawyers demanding additional redactions. So there are a couple of potential reasons that they might want to do last minute redactions after giving these documents to conservative politicians and journalists. It could be that they're like trying to protect, it's about Russian efforts to meddle in the election. It's not like they're trying to redact a conclusion that they didn't, that nothing untoward was done and Trump comes out of it looking like a really cool, innocent guy. They obviously gave this to journalists because they thought there was something that the journalists could use that would be harmful for Hillary Clinton, Comey, I don't know. And then they realized after giving it out that there was something that they didn't want friendly politicians and journalists to know about. And then eventually, it's just gone. It was not among the documents that were recovered from Mar-a-Lago. No word yet on whether it's in his former ex-wife's coffin, along possibly with other documents. There's a lot of concern about it possibly having been flown somewhere. There's a few other theories too, but I've thrown a lot out there. Ramesh, I want to start with you. What do you make of this?
I mean, sure, it's another example of how casually, not just the former president, but in general, these sorts of secrets that are supposed to be so, ironclad, can just get out or just disappear, right? And I think it's actually interesting to think about that in relation to the physical binders of secrets, those being lost, because I think a pretty clear assumption that many of us know these days is almost anything digital or datafied at some point, I can't say almost anything, but very often these things get leaked or dumped out, right? So the other thing that I note is if such information is actually really important, would that not be critically important in terms of trying to protect, whatever level of integrity we can with the forthcoming election? We know that the Russians interfered in our election. We also know that that's a very common thing. That's not sort of a unique thing, that countries interfere in one another's elections. Sometimes in our case, that might mean our military, like just invading and killing people. You know what I mean? That's our version of it, right? So given that, and given so much anxiety associated with Putin, who just said he's going to stay on till at least 2030, right? And what's likely to come, where the media is going to try to figure out a way to critique Trump. With this binder going missing, I mean, that's a potentially serious issue. It's a potentially very serious issue. And I guess it gets to the larger point about the larger inequalities that we have as human beings. This is a little bit tied to this, right? So as citizens of this country, we are only barely aware of how often we are being surveilled, not just by private corporations, but by the state, right? The state and corporations, private corporations are best buddies in this country because of the corruption of the political system, right? But it's so interesting how rarely we actually learn about those who spy on us, right?
Yeah,
we know we are spied on, but we are never able to watch the watchers, right? So in this particular case, the watcher might be the Russian state, which could actually be important in trying to protect whatever we can out of this election, so it's at least supportive of us US citizens, though that itself is a nauseating thing to even begin to think about.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Mondale, thoughts?
Here's what's baffling to me. How in the hell are we just hearing about this? I'm confused that we're just hearing about this, mainly because if we don't know what this document is, this 10-inch thick document is, binder, and it was raw intelligence, that means any source that had anything to do with it should be pulled out of the field. All of those agents should be decommissioned for their safety. And just because we don't know who has this document and who they've shared it with, if I was an agent for the United States or any of our allies, and my name was in that document, I would be on fire right now. On fire. Like, this is Scooter Libby level crazy to me. The fact that we're talking about human capital is not just the way that we retrieved it, the people who were able to put this document together, the people, the sources, their contacts, all of those people are in jeopardy. And I'm just a little nervous about the fact that Senate leadership knew about this for so long, people in the CIA knew about this for so long, and America, citizens like us are just hearing about this. Seriously, this is dangerous.
Yeah, it's just a great example of how little is actually disclosed to us as US citizens about these sort of apparatuses of surveillance, right? And the other thing I would and so how we are supposed to be the ones in power in this country, but we know so little about what is being done to us, even in a sort of governmental sense, even in terms of our own state government, our own national government surveilling us all. But then the other thing just to remember is, in case any of this information includes Russians who had corroborated or collaborated with these so-called intelligence agencies, they're all in big trouble.
That's true.
Because we know what the Russian government and Putin does to anyone who gets in his way.
Yeah.
They're in big trouble, big graves. They may be already dead because if the documents were retrieved, sent back to Russia, or leaked to anybody in their circle, they've already been wiped out. Them and likely a lot of other people. So it's extremely baffling.
100%. I mean, there's a lot, I think, that, and I'll close with one other thing that's sort of baffling to me. Like Cassidy Hutchinson, former aide under the Trump administration, said that she's almost certain that Mr. Meadows had it, and she was the one who wrote in her book Enough that he had been, like, in the last minutes of the Trump administration, before Biden was sworn in, running around with a binder under one arm, like a football, telling journalist John Solomon, "How fast can you get me to the Department of Justice? They can use lights and sirens, sir. You should make it there before noon, even with the road closed." This is like, I have to get this out of the city. He said at one point, "Good, let's do it. I am not gonna be the chief of staff who doesn't get this binder declassified." So hold on, remember, and just think about this. So first of all, I am also mad that they didn't tell us about this. This whole time we've been worried about what could have been in the documents that were stolen. It would have been helpful to know that there was stuff that's directly tied to one of the shadiest areas of the Trump administration in its first term. But like they've been saying ever since, you don't know if we declassified this stuff. All I have to do is wrinkle my nose. We could have declassified, but we know that they didn't go through the process, except apparently at the last minute for this one thing, as if they were thinking until the last minute, well, surely Biden's not actually getting into office. Oh, damn, he's going to. This is the most important document in the government. What the hell is in that thing? Any final quick thoughts before we move on?
No, I mean, I just think that, like, I'll just kind of dial back and look at this from above, right? This election is coming up now. I know you all are going to be constantly covering this, and we're going to be talking about this even more today. But I really, really, really hope we can put some power and specificity to try to ensure that this election is as fair and is of as much integrity as possible. So like, all right, we have like a little air to breathe and a little time before things really get rolling and drummed up. Of course, the caucuses and all this are coming soon. But are there ways we progressives, or let's just say American citizens, can try to come together and insist on a set of rules and protocols that ensure some level of integrity? Because I just think that right now we're just surrounded by anxiety and a sense of alienation. Like, I think a lot of people are just not going to roll out and vote for this election.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that. Mondale, final thoughts?
So yeah, I think for me, here's what's dastardly to me. I don't think people care. I mean, we see a large swath of Americans' population actually still going along with the big lie. I don't think that they care. People are no longer bothered by Putin. Putin is not an enemy because Trump said so. Putin has become cool as Trump in some circles, and that is the scary part. We found out that the Constitution is not, loving the Constitution is not what make you patriotic in 2024 election cycle, right? What makes you patriotic is if you support Donald Trump and whatever he wants to do, including being a dictator on day one. So I think we are already past the point where we can put up guardrails to stop this. We as I'm glad you said as much as possible, because as much as possible means that Donald Trump can't take us out of NATO if he is to win, because we just saw that be presented. But I think right now, as it pertains to our election, people don't even care about election integrity or democracy anymore. Not everybody. I don't want to be that cynical, but there's a large swath of people, and we have to know that, because they see Trump after Trump losing from Republican judges that he appointed. And then they just turn their back on those people. Any institution in this country that does not stand up for Donald Trump's big lie becomes anti-American, anti-patriotic, which means the only thing left is, if you are American, if you are patriotic, you must support Donald Trump. And that's it.
100%. Yeah.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. We also love it if you hit the join button below, because that makes you a member, and members allow us to be independent, honest. We can be as progressive as we want, no corporate media influence, and that's all because of you guys. We love doing the show with our members. Hit the join button, become one of the Young Turks.